This is the story of Joseph Paul DeWise, a man whose crumbling marriage sent him into a downward spiral. His love for his wife, Lauren, had transformed into an obsession, one that would ultimately turn deadly. As Lauren pulled away, his emotions became overwhelming. He turned to alcohol, drowning in self-loathing. His heartbreak twisted into something darker: resentment, anger, and eventually, hatred. Unable to cope with losing Lauren, Paul began stalking her. When he discovered she was dating other men, something inside him snapped. On the night of January 7, 2018, Lauren DeWise was found dead in her bedroom. The investigation confirmed that Paul was responsible. What makes this case particularly disturbing is that Paul documented his entire descent, from the early cracks in his marriage to the moment he committed the ultimate act of violence. On July 24, 2017, Paul wrote Lauren a letter, one of the first clear signs that their marriage was falling apart. It also revealed his deep self-hatred. "I have no excuse for what happened last night. I am a very bad person for you right now. I hate myself. I do not deserve you. I have no reason to be loved by you or the kids. I ruin everything. You deserve someone way better than me." Paul wrote this letter just hours after a heated argument. He had lost his temper and screamed at Lauren in front of their 3 children. It was likely not the first time, but this time something changed. Lauren had enough. Paul's guilt was evident in his words, but it was more than just regret. It was fear. His journal entries described growing up in an abusive household. Another thing Paul regularly did was contact people in Lauren's life. Paul's messages to Lauren and those around her continued for months. Then, on November 14th, Paul's worst fears became reality. He found evidence that Lauren had started dating again. That same week, he signed up for a GPS tracking service and secretly registered her phone to the system. Paul began stalking her. He followed her to various bars, taking pictures to store away as proof, evidence he could later use to confront her. But on November 14th, things took a much darker turn. While tracking her, Paul discovered Lauren sitting in her car, making out with a coworker named Kevin. When Kevin eventually left the car, Paul seized the moment. He rushed over, letting Lauren know he had seen everything. Paul then took Lauren's phone and began furiously texting Kevin a series of enraged messages, but Lauren eventually managed to escape the situation. Roughly 22 hours later, Paul found Lauren again, this time with a different man. The final breaking point in Paul's downward spiral came in an incident completely unrelated to Lauren. One day, while out walking with his daughter, Paul passed a house where dogs were barking at him from behind a fence. Furious, he began threatening the homeowner. When the man confronted him, Paul, enraged, pulled out a pocket knife and stabbed him in the hip. Despite the violence of the encounter, Paul got lucky. The homeowner had technically put his hands on Paul first, so the stabbing was ruled as self-defense. He walked away with no charges. But this incident revealed something chilling. Paul was no longer afraid of violence. If anything, he seemed to embrace it. On January 6, 2018, at 11:56 a.m., Paul texted Lauren inviting her over for soup. She never replied. At 3:36 p.m., he messaged again. "Are we still meeting tomorrow?" Lauren finally responded. "For what?" "I'd like to pick up my daughter and spend time with her." This angered Paul. He launched into one of his usual rants, sending desperate messages. "I beg you, please don't destroy us. I love you and will do whatever it takes." Hours later, at 10:58 p.m., Lauren responded, "Number, thank you." For the next 2 hours, there were no further texts between them. But Paul was busy. He was making plans. Paul was captured on CCTV at a town pump gas station at 12:34 a.m. Minutes later, he took a blurry photograph from his phone, which showed Lauren's home in the distance, along with a GPS tracking device inside his vehicle. Hours later, a neighbor frantically called 911, reporting that a woman had come to their door in distress, stating that someone had shot her roommate. The caller identified the shooter as Paul DeWise and confirmed that one victim, Lauren, was deceased, while the other, Ashley, was still alive but severely injured. Emergency responders rushed to the scene. When authorities arrived, a witness who had stayed elsewhere the previous night described discovering the back door broken in and footprints in the snow. Rushing upstairs, they found Lauren unresponsive and Ashley severely wounded. Uncertain if the shooter was still present, the witness fled to seek help. Upon entering the house, officers discovered Lauren deceased and Ashley critically injured, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds, including one to the back of her head. With the shooter still unaccounted for, officers cleared the house, searching for any signs of Paul. There they discovered a trail of bloody footprints leading from the house, an initially minor detail that would later become a crucial piece of evidence in solving the case. Amazingly, Ashley survived the attack. She underwent multiple emergency surgeries, fracture treatments, and blood transfusions. After Ashley had recovered from her surgeries, detectives conducted a formal interview with her to help recall critical details about the attack. Despite being questioned for over 30 minutes, she was unable to remember anything about the shooting due to the trauma she had suffered. Lacking physical evidence, detectives turned to witness testimonies. One of the most significant came from Audrey, the neighbor who had called 911 and initially named Paul DeWise as the prime suspect. When questioned, she provided insight into Lauren's abusive relationship with Paul, revealing that Lauren had confided in her about the years of domestic violence she endured. Audrey had noticed bruises on Lauren before, which Lauren had initially dismissed, but later admitted were the result of Paul's abuse. She also described Paul's erratic behavior, highlighting how he frequently sent her conflicting messages, alternating between blaming her for ruining his life, apologizing, and expressing self-pity. Given the risk involved in approaching Paul directly, officers devised a strategic plan to arrest him safely. His house was placed under surveillance, and once he left his home, officers coordinated a high-risk felony stop to apprehend him. The plan was executed flawlessly. Paul was pulled over while driving and was taken into custody without incident. From the moment Paul entered the interrogation room, his behavior raised red flags. Without being prompted, he continuously steered the conversation toward Lauren, as if trying to control the narrative. When detectives finally broke the news of Lauren's murder, his reaction was immediate but suspicious. While he initially feigned shock, he quickly transitioned into self-preservation mode, declaring, "If you think I did it, I didn't do it." Rather than asking details about Lauren's murder or expressing genuine sorrow, Paul launched into a speech about their marital problems, claiming she was having a midlife crisis and accusing her of infidelity. As detectives pressed for a timeline of his whereabouts, Paul initially claimed he hadn't left his house at all that night. This was a crucial misstep. Surveillance footage later revealed that Paul had, in fact, been at a gas station at 12:34 a.m., a fact that he had completely omitted from his story. With Paul's alibi crumbling, investigators turned their attention to his son, Joseph. Joseph's first interrogation was cautious. In his second interrogation, Joseph's defenses began to break down. Overwhelmed with emotion, Joseph finally admitted that he had been home when his father left that night. With overwhelming evidence, Joseph's confession, Paul DeWise was arrested and charged with deliberate homicide, attempted deliberate homicide, and tampering with evidence. On February 4, 2020, nearly 2 years after his arrest, he was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 220 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice had finally been served for Lauren. Hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more crime stories.